Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Blindspot. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we open with that nightmare that Jane has. That's so interesting, because obviously this has a personal connection for her too. Obviously, not just the whole thing of her personal experience with Zip, but also she zipped Roman, and obviously that turned into a whole travesty. And then to see the people that you care about most, the person you care about most, Kurt being zipped as well, and it's so interesting because Jane's had so many nightmares lately. I don't remember her ever having this many nightmares back to back, or at least a show showcasing it like that. The way they have it's just I guess it's supposed to be very foreshadowing, but also showing you just how dire this situation is, that it's literally penetrating her dreams and her nightmares. So it's kind of a thing of obviously she's scared because for her she trails this all back to be it's all my fault. Literally she's every bad thing that's ever happened to this group can be trailed back to me if I never came out of that bag. But it's she's even saying if I turned myself over, then maybe Madeline will go kind of easy and leave you guys alone. But Kurt's no, even if you turn yourself in, Madeline's just going to keep doing what she's going to do. Nothing's going to stop her. We have to be the ones to stop her. She won't stop until she's stopped. So there's that whole situation. Now it's all about tracking down the Zip shipment. The fact of the matter is, I thought it was kind of interesting and very, not necessarily ironic, but very how I guess serendipitous would kind of be the word. Was the fact is that they tracked down where the Zip was being manufactured and stuff like that, and using the virus that Madeline used to frame them, they were able to Rich was able to destroy, using that as a means of kind of destroying the Zip and everything. And it led to an interesting thing where obviously Madeline's on top of the world because it's oh yeah, I'm at the top list of next VP and stuff like that. And then there's a whole situation where Ivy's comes and she's pissed because it's everything's kind of falling apart. They got rid of the supply of Zip, but it's no, I've got backups. One in Libya and somewhere else. And so it's I already have all this stuff lined up. Then they'd be okay, we actually have someone that we could use to track down the team. I'm who is it? And it turned out to be Allie. I was oh, I was holy crap. Also, it's I think very befitting to kind of see Trissy Kelly Dunn, returning to the show, probably at the very least one more time. So I think that's kind of a nice way to kind of go about that. But it's oh man. And what I thought was interesting, it's oh, how'd you know how to track them down? It's oh yeah, this and that. And then it's oh, it's revealed that Ivy didn't tell Madeline about the whole thing about where she got the information from because it was related to Kurt. But again, because that would mean admitting that she had Kurt for a while and then ended up losing him. So she didn't want to because that probably wouldn't want to piss off Madeline, because it's the last thing you want is her to know about your failures. So making it seem like that never happened. So I thought that was kind of interesting because she's why didn't you never tell me this information? It's well, I'm telling you now. And it's yeah, because bringing up that information before, regardless. I just thought that was kind of handled very interestingly. And then Madeline's oh, I'm going to go in there and deal with Allie, which Ivy was don't underestimate her. And Madeline was don't underestimate me. Dude, once again, you got to give it up for Madeline. In a sense of man, she's just, once again, that villain you love to hate. Just oh, I hate you, Madeline. But once again, I say it every time, she's such a damn super villain. Just the way she's manipulating Allie. Oh my God, why'd you run if you were his? She's Kurt was labeled as a terrorist. It's yeah, we worked missions together, but if I knew he was a criminal, I would have arrested him and the rest of the team. And she's, trying to play this of, being oh, I run on a run because Kurt could have easily come after her. And obviously I'm trying to protect me and my daughter, which obviously Madeline sees through that, and she's trying to maneuver it by being well, you should have, you're part of, as a marshal, about WITSEC, and, but it's yeah, but Patterson is very good at fighting people. It's Allie had responses for all this stuff, some good enough responses. And the way she plays certain things up, you're she probably wants to kind of play into it because she knows those interrogation rooms are recorded. So just for any playback, so, Madeline tries to maneuver certain things. She can, maneuver, in her own way to kind of dodge around it. But the way she's oh yeah, your daughter, it's oh yeah, how she's oh, I have a son I'm very proud of, and it's yeah, you worry, as a mother you worry about your children because anything could happen. You're oh, so, and in that moment you can tell Allie's looking at her because it's oh, you're threatening my daughter. I know I can't do anything. She's like, oh, so the fact is, even threatening to arrest him, it's like, well, you have nothing you can hold me against. It's like, yeah, I can hold you without for so long without charges and stuff like that because like this is like a national security situation because you're the father of your child, and the fact of the matter is the rest of his team are wanted. So it's just like boom, boom, this like back and forth, this like almost like chess match of words between them. I thought was kind of fascinating. So all of that's happening. Obviously, everyone's kind of splitting up to deal with because basically they're trying to put trackers on the zips because they can't rather than just destroy them because destroying them won't do anything. All you're going to do is make it. Madeline's just going to make more. So you need to kind of take her down before you stop any of the zip stuff. And the moment what was it? I think it was Rich who had suggested, no, I think it was Tasha that had suggested using the zip against her. I immediately was like, wait, are you talking about zipping Madeline? It's like, oh, no, tracking it. I was like, okay, never mind. I was like, wait, where did that come from? That whole thing about like zipping her, like how that was going to come into play. I was like, oh, I was confused for a second, but nevertheless. But it isn't just about also tracking him because obviously for Jane, it's like the last thing, yes, tracking him is fine and dandy, but we're still putting the zip in Madeline's hand. So it's like, Patterson suggests that they like neutralize it essentially. And it's a certain process that Rich and Tasha got off immediately. Like they did it perfectly immediately. Jane, not so much, just because obviously she's like this whole nightmare she had has made her very nerve-wracked about it because like so many people's lives are in the balance. Like millions of people will lose their memories and become like basically little puppets for basically Madeline to manipulate and make her be like, oh, I'm the one that's here to save you. You follow my orders. I'll lead you down the right path. I'm in doing this for your best interest. Obviously she's doing it for her own. But nevertheless, so Jane and Kurt still working on it. Rich and Tasha, they go tracking their samples of the zip, but turns out, lo and behold, who's there? Greg Burke, Madeline's son. I was like, oh, no, that's interesting. So the question then becomes like, well, and the entire episode, I was still kind of flip-flopping. I was like, and so I kept wondering whether there's going to be like some reveal or twist where in actuality it's like, oh no, like he secretly worked for his mom and he was manipulating Tasha the entire time. I was kind of expecting that. I was just like, is that where this twist is going to go? Or is he actually legitimately a good guy, which is actually kind of a shame considering the psychopath that your mom is. Because Tasha ended up sneaking on board because it was the only way to get to the zip because it was already packaged away. So she has to pretend like, oh, I'm another doctor. Oh, because he's like, I recognize you. She's like, oh, I'm not that good with faces either. So blah, blah, blah. And then he mentions his mom and then he remembers Tasha. So it's like, she's like, just give me time to explain basically all the plot about how terrible your mom is. Oh man, what about all those people like Blake and the heads of HGI Global that your mom killed? Oh, you don't believe me about that? Well, what about this? What about that? And obviously he's still reluctant to believe. What about your dad? I was like, ooh, right. Let's not forget the thing that your mom murdered him. And then there's also the thing of like, oh yeah, she also smiled when she was recalling how she murdered your dad, And so it's a thing of like, because even Tasha was like, I can tell there's on some level you do somewhat believe me. It isn't like this whole thing about your mom. It's not 100% far-fetched in your head. But for him, it's like, once again, this is his mom. So he wants to believe the best, so he's not really willing to believe. But it's like he also knows what zip is. So the moment Tasha mentions, she's like, "Whoa, you know what zip is? So you know how dangerous and how bad it is." Because he thinks his mom is helping him kind of cut through some red tape to get some medicine to people who really, countries and the people who really need it. So he thinks his mom's being a little altruistic, when in actuality, once again, she's very psychopathic. But when it was all said and done, it did work out for Tasha because he didn't, Greg didn't turn on her or like, he's like, I don't totally believe you, but she's like, if you see anything or you want to get in contact with me, here's this voicemail, you can like leave me a message and stuff like that. So there's that. Then there's a whole situation with Jane and Kurt's side of thing when they're trying to handle their operation. And then like obviously there's this scare, obviously for one, like obviously Jane's still nervous about the whole her doing the whole tampering with the zip thing, canisters. And then partway through it, like some of it sprays on Kurt, and it's like, holy shit, I didn't expect that to really end up happening. Luckily, they're like, all right, it didn't actually penetrate my clothes. It's like, let me just take this coat off. He's like, I'm good. And obviously Jane's like panicking. She's like, I'm sorry, I messed up. He's like, no. Like the tops of these things are like messed up, so it's not on you. But she was scared because like in that, like, once again, her nightmares like almost came true because it was like in that moment she could have lost Kurt, like everything they had, It would have been a repeat of like the Roman situation to a certain extent. So it was just, panic, inducing. at the same time, they're listening in on Ivy, who ends up showing up later after they've dealt with all the canisters put on the trackers. But the tracker had to be turned off because Ivy was checking for bugs and everything. But then later on, they bring up, oh yeah, like Madeline has Allie, and now Kurt and Jane are hearing this, and obviously that's sending like Kurt in overdrive, like shit, because obviously he's worried about Allie and Bethany, because it's like, okay, she has Allie, who's to say she doesn't have Bethany? It's not a guarantee. But Jane was like, the fact is, like, Allie had to do that like speech and everything and on camera, so it's like obviously she must obviously she wouldn't, if she had Bethany, like Madeline would have put Bethany out there too to be even more bait to draw us in. And that whole thing was, like, once again, from an evil person perspective, it's like, Madeline's a smooth operator, the way she was able to kind of twist that situation. Because once again, I liked Allie playing at it, like, on it, like, herself, trying to be, like, all teary-eyed, like, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, like, because she's trying to convince Madeline, which obviously Madeline's not being convinced, but also, like I said, I think she's playing to the cameras, like, just in case anyone plays this recording back, make it seem like Madeline was kind of forcing her, so... I mean, like I said, I'm under the impression to be fair, Madeline could make some excuse to be like, well, we didn't record that. Whatever the case may be, it's just basically saying like, hey, your daughter's already going to be growing up without a father. The last thing you want is your daughter to grow up without a mother either. And kind of basically suggesting like, it's like, this is in the best interest of your child and you, because like we could put you in this situation and then eventually when Allie makes her statement like about Kurt turning himself in. It's a whole thing about like later on, like Melanie's like, oh man, I said Melanie, Madeline. It's like, oh man, you did a great job. I'm gonna have my personal security look after you. She's like, no, that's not what we agreed upon. She's like, but I couldn't possibly let you leave here. Now that you've made that message, you put yourself in danger. She's like, you were never gonna let me go. It's like, it's like, oh, but you want your daughter with you. You can always just bring her here. It's like, yeah, let me bring my daughter here so she can be an extra hostage for you to draw Kurt out. Once again, it's just like, man. But I like this line from Allison, not Allison. Oh yeah, maybe I've known her name was Allison. I don't know. I've always just known her as Allie, so it's weird to just for her just to be fully Allison. But regardless, tangents and all that. I love that whole thing where it's just like, she's like, all right, when it comes to hunting criminals, hunting fugitives, there's a thing you learn that it takes balance. That basically you focus on one area too much, that basically you're going to lose sight and basically not see something coming in the other direction. It's like, because Madeline's like, oh, this whole thing, success, takes sacrifice, and Allie's basically like, at the end of the day, like, how much is too much? You won't know how much is too much to sacrifice until it's kind of too late. The moment she started bringing it up, I'm like, your son is going to be like, obviously be that thing, because obviously you care very deeply for your son. And I love the whole thing when Tasha got back, she was kind of upset because it's like, yeah, we never got the trackers on those canisters, nor was I able to kind of neutralize them. But so she's like, it was a failure of mission. But it's like, no, we didn't succeed on that front, but every other front, it's okay. Like, plus we got Greg on the inside, and then like, because Craig had met with his mom, and I like that. I was like, the fact is he met with his mom meant like he started believing Tasha, and he started asking certain questions like, oh mom, like why didn't we pay to have an autopsy for that? She's like, it was this, like why would there be a need to like have an autopsy for a heart attack? And he started bringing it up, and she's like, no. She's like quickly changing the subject. I was like, oh, you're laying it on a little thick, but she's not thinking too much of it until the champagne, where he was hesitant to drink it because it's like, oh, it got in his head like, well, to be fair, your mom at that time, your mom wouldn't poison you. But part of me was like, if she got onto you, she would have poisoned you. Because obviously, it's like when you cut back to like the whole situation with like Tasha, where it's like Tasha was like, she had a bad feeling about this whole situation because she felt like we're literally doing the exact same thing that what was it that Madeline had what was it Madeline she was comparing to? She was like. She felt bad because it's like, oh, we're putting someone in a position where we're manipulating and using them, just like his mom was using him. She felt like they were doing the same thing, but it's like, oh, it's completely different. Madeline brought her son into this the moment she got him involved in everything. We're trying to get him on the right side of things. And Tasha was like, why do I not feel good about this? And my immediate thought was, oh, because you know how psychopathic Madeline can be. She's willing to kill her husband and kind of smile about it afterwards. So I think that kind of, in itself kind of proves a lot. So that's why I was kind of like, okay, like, I was like, oh, is this going to go down the road I think it's going to go? I was like, and then we saw someone in the chair. I was like, isn't that what Greg was wearing? And he's in a got a bag over his head and he removed it. I was like, oh god. I was like, is she really about to kill her own son? And I thought she was capable of this. There's still a part of me. I was like, she wouldn't actually do it, would she? But she was suspicious of him because it's like the just like, to be fair, like Madeline's like mad paranoid, especially because like the timing and just like him bringing up certain questions, it didn't all fit right. I was like, oh, it was kind of a bummer because it would have been neat if Greg could have like associated with Whites, which we didn't get Whites this episode, but if they could have like locked up and met up, there's the whole friend situation because obviously her and Whites are on kind of opposite sides to a certain extent about this whole thing, especially after everything last episode, but. I thought that could have been like another insider, but turns out not to be the case. I was like, God, is she about to kill her own son? I was like, oh, and she's going behind him. I was like, oh, what are you going to do? I was like, is she going to, she pulls out a zip. I was like, oh my gosh, she zipped her own son. Because he will never remember her. I mean, granted, he could, but you'd have to go through a lot for those memories to finally come back up. To be fair, it's also a new formula of zip, so it could be even more potent than the first batch. Because that was the whole thing, too. Like, Cuz Patterson brought up the first batch of zip had to be injected, but the fact that like the original formula for zip had to be injected, but like who knows what the delivery device is going to be like, whether it's going to be like airborne or whatever type of situation. But I was like, damn. And like for her, it's like you can tell it's so interesting because like Madeline seems like she didn't give a shit about anything in this world, and the moment she zipped her son, you see her heart break. Like that, for that one moment you saw a human side of her. I was like, that's so interesting. And then she kind of goes, whatever, success is necessary, success, got to do whatever you can or need to do to get that. So, and at the same time, like Ivy ended up bringing up something about Allie, which I'm like, what the hell is that about? Like I was curious, like what is that thing that like she ended up like that fire. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, oh, that doesn't sound good. So there's that. Obviously, Weller, Kurt was kind of like, he wanted to go to Allie, but obviously, like, he turned himself in. But then, like, Jane had to remind him, it's like, no, the fact of the matter is, this is about taking her down. Like you said before, it's the only way to stop Madeline, is, so, because this isn't going to stop anything. So, but going through the video over and over again, he notices Allie's sign and is like, that was our sign to be like, the mission's a go. So, keep going. And Jane's like, that's exactly right. It's not just about us anymore. So many people are pushing us to end this whole situation with Madeline. And then hard cut to at the same time, it's like we see someone else getting the message, and it turns out to be Keaton. I'm like, of course it'd be Keaton, but it's like, holy shit. Of course it's so, because obviously he has his personal connection to the team. Obviously he worked with Tasha. Obviously he was part of the team that had Jane in the black site, at the end of season 1, through to the beginning of season 2. But it's like, of course Keaton would be on there, and he's like, Allie gave him the sign. He's like, that was a sign saying a mission's a go, about it's time to send the team another clue. And I'm like, holy crap! So Allie had to be a part of this too, because it's like whoever it was that. Obviously, whoever she left Bethany with would have to be someone she had to like really fully trust, and for it to be someone that Madeline wouldn't be able to easily get to, and him being CIA, I mean, with the connections he has, it makes sense. They would once again, they're closely tied enough to know the ins and outs about this whole tattoo situation, so or they knew what kind of stuff to leave and point to get the team's attention while also getting Patterson's attention. But it's like, okay, whoever he's talking to on the phone is like, they must, so it's like it's going to be a lot of familiar faces, I'm assuming. I kind of thought that, but it just never crossed my mind to think Keaton. So it's like, okay, so Keaton, who else involved in this? It's a large scale group, it's a small scale group, whatever the case may be. I thought that was kind of a nice reveal, and it's like, all right, and he even said that we're entering the end game, because this is episode 6, right? I think so. I believe so. It could be. This might even be episode 7. I can't remember, because once again, we are closing into the end of this series, so we're definitely kind of in the final stages of everything. So, either way, I am very, very interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and good